So the presentation for today was really aimed at showing experiments that we're doing at Antariksha Studio right now on UEFN. We're an India-based transmedia storytelling collective. We've been supported by Epic Mega Grants in recent years. And this work that you're seeing is actually also coming from our work with Epic Mega Grants. Just a quick introduction. We've been around for several years. We haven't published our first commercial game till now, because as all of you know, it's a long journey to make a AAA video game. And currently we have two video game-based projects going on. Antara, which is a full video game in a traditional sense, and Elsewhere is a performance but builds using video games. A little bit about Antara, for those who might know. Antara is a rhythmic adventure through colonial India, which follows a mother and son as they explore different parts of India, explore the arts, culture, traditions, but also try to discover these secret aeronautical flying machines and try to discover them before the Britishers do. A big part of the project is obviously on amplifying Indian culture and trying to see how can traditional Indian culture and vanishing arts and crafts find their way into global AAA video games. This is not a simple journey. I've been doing this for 10 years. I haven't released the game as yet, but I'm sure we will soon, and maybe it'll be on UEFN. Just some clips from some of the work that came from the early part of our Epic Mega Grants. So this is obviously on Unreal Engine 5. We're working with MetaHumans, we're doing motion capture, we're trying to build it the right way, which is also the very difficult and expensive way. And this is a slow project, and while this was going on, we also started a project called Elsewhere in India, which we wanted to be a faster project on Unreal. This is a performance project looking at the concept of Indo-futurism, following these three characters. And this is a music-led project belonging more to the electronic music scene in India. So tomorrow, for example, in Bombay, we have a live concert where we will perform with Unreal and AI and other visuals behind us. We've traveled around the world this year performing with this. This again uses MetaHumans. There are three characters, Meenakshi, Murtovich, and Tiruda. That's actually my avatar. And this is set in the future. And as you go through different environments, you kind of explore these future cities. Wait, this video is not working. Yeah. And you kind of also explore artifacts from museums that we've been working with, and we try and find a way for where Indian culture can find its way in this kind of a sci-fi future. I'm not going to spend too much time on those because the topic for today is how that work translates and relates to work that could be done on UEFN. Obviously, for the people here who are aware of game development, these are all the many, many challenges in making independent AAA work. Not just independent, but AAA work in general. But independent makes it maybe 10 times, 50 times, 100 times more harder. And so this is where we were when we were doing this project. Like, how do we get to that next stage? How does our work, which we know can look as good as anything in the world, how do we actually put all this together to prove to ourselves and to other people that we can do it? And this is where recently, I would say not even so long back, maybe 4 months back, the Unreal India team and the Epic Mega Grant team got in touch with us with a simple question. Would you like to experiment with UEFN and port Antara and Elsewhere in India to UEFN? My team said no, I said yes, instantly, because I was looking at the larger picture from what I've done my research on, and somehow all these challenges that I told you in almost an instant, I felt like maybe those challenges have a solution with UEFN. And so we began this journey. I'm going to go through this a little bit fast. Sorry about that. But just to kind of help all of you understand a little bit of what it means to build on UEFN, and also to put it out there that we don't have a final island on UEFN. We're hoping to put it out maybe in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So what I wanted to show you is the dirty, messy part, which I think is important when it comes to new technologies. So for plot and gameplay, our big question was, how do we port Antara to UEFN when what we are focusing on is Indian classical dance and music? So we said, okay, let's move beyond the heritage and let's look at where is Indian culture and dance, where is it being modern today? So some of you might have seen this viral video on hip hop and Bharatanatyam. That's a great example of how those two kind of forces can be combined. We also looked at other multiplayer dance games. We looked at also old school things like Guitar Hero and DDR, and looked at how those kind of rhythm and body explorations might be more suited for UEFN than the kind of game we were building before, which had puzzles, storytelling, lore, NPCs, all of that stuff. So building on that, we started imagining the island of Antara, which would be famous for its dancing and musical automaton puzzles and characters. The idea that there's a lobby. This is pretty much the first drawing, basically. And the idea was also that let's make it simple so that many people can play with it. And we're also started doing some more concept art and AI art, looking at how we can push our world to be a little bit more not towards Fortnite, but kind of like finding that sweet spot, so to speak. So here we started identifying all the various stuff that we were doing in UE5, trying to identify simple points of views like vantage points, shops, markets, which could encourage casual and fast exploration and not the need to like go in and understand what this guy's story is and so on. And also looking at a centerpiece on our original island, which was essentially an ancient market, and trying to understand how possibly the market on our island can potentially in the future work with the market on Fortnite, for example. So those are some of, or with Fab, obviously that some of you might be using. So that was one part of it. And then moving on, we started understanding, what happens to our characters. We just about got into meta-humans properly, and now we're thinking of being on UEFN and junking that for a little bit at least. Though I'm sure it'll make its way on the roadmap sometime. So this was one big question: how do you take this fidelity? And also, more importantly, there are no NPCs in the traditional sense. I mean, there are, but not in the traditional sense of how we were making a game. So what happens to all these NPCs? And most importantly, that is Ramanujan, the young boy over there who's running. He's one of the main characters. What happens to the main characters? Because every main character is someone from some other world, is someone from some other time. They're not belonging to the late 1800s in India. They might look like anything that anybody can look like in Fortnite with their vanities and cosmetics and so on. So what happens to a game like that when you push all of this new stuff into it? So one idea was that, what happens to character models? Can we build our NPCs in a way pushing the heritage into a Fortnite kind of style? So these are some AI early work I just wanted to share with you, which I thought was pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of potential in general for Indian representation and South Asian cultural representation inside Fortnite. Besides UEFN, there's a huge challenge just in Fortnite. But for us, I think UEFN opens the door to really create that kind of sweet spot, because I think a lot of global audiences either look at India as this kind of heritage, ancient place with, Varanasi and all of this stuff, Kumbh Mela and things like that, or they look at it as some IT hub devoid of culture. And I think there's a brilliant sweet spot in there, which studios like ours are really looking to understand and explore in the coming years. We also did some fun experiments with assets from our own world and, using, of course, Midjourney and so on, but trying to say, okay, what do our assets look like in Fortnite? What does it look like if there are people with guns around it? What does it look like when the colors are different? And should we be trying to recreate our assets in a way that it fits Fortnite? For example, and you will see this in the video I'm going to share as well. Should we be trying to do this and essentially, or should we stick to our guns and force Fortnite to look like us, basically? And again, just to mention, this is playful fighting. It's not really us against Fortnite or anything like that. But I think it's important to think about cultural representation inside Fortnite. And that includes discussions like this inside teams like ours. Do we take away the culture? Where's the sweet spot? Where do we become globalized? And I think all these three questions are equally important. Including things like this. I mean, it's brilliant to also just exciting to see our world in a modern way. So this is again early thoughts, just trying to understand and grapple with what this means. And also importantly, what does it mean to go from a single player story-based game to a multiplayer action adventure, fast-moving musical world. And dance and music is very important for us. So we also started looking therefore at saying, okay, single player, that's one of the original characters inspired, like it's a Bharatanatyam dancer who's actually my mother, who's also part of this game. That's not her, but the idea was there's a single player dancer. Obviously, dance can be single player, double, two player, three player, multiplayer, right? Dance has, and so can Indian music. So that kind of, brought us thinking about the fact that, hey, let's not think so black and white about this. Indian culture at its best is extremely scalable in every form. And so we started looking at this deeper into what kind of dance form. Do we move from classical to folk, which we anyway were doing, but do we also include things like Bollywood, which includes Indian classical dance forms? Obviously, a lot of the popular Bollywood dance forms are inspired by Indian classical dance forms. And also, Bollywood is extremely popular around the world. Though I'm personally not a big fan of current Bollywood personally, but I do appreciate the fact that it has a global audience. And so this is again trying to think about the spectrum of what do we do basically, right? And I think a big part of this thinking was also understanding that Fortnite is a global audience. all these years when we've been trying to make our game, we've been thinking, okay, we make a game, how do we get a global audience? Are Indians more interested in Indian culture, or are foreigners more interested in Indian culture? And sometimes the sad truth is that foreigners are more interested in Indian culture. So it creates an indie game development studio like ours, who's seriously trying to do this independently in a very tight fix. But something like UEFN, I think in some sense clarified that decision for us, saying it is the biggest global audience you can find. So let's not think about this in those black and white terms again. Let's see what we can do. Similarly with the music, I'll show you these models again. These are models we've made in an attempt to combine video games with digital heritage work. We've also been designing some new funky looking like sarods and new age instruments from the other project that combine classical and modern together. And we also made a long list of technical questions for the Unreal team, Arvind being one of them, who just presented, who's been kind enough to help and guide us along this journey. Not going to go through this, but some of the stuff I covered, what really happens, including things like size limit, verse as a programming language, why should we learn another language, blah, 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 blah. And most importantly, what's the future roadmap, which I think some of you would have seen this. But what we did was we kind of, in yellow, pink, and red, we said, okay, if we're going to do this seriously, then we have to be on the same roadmap. And Epic normally follows up on its roadmap, so that's thankfully something to depend on. But also understanding that, hey, we're not even here right now in some sense. We're actually one step behind, I would say, with where we are with UEFN, just marginally. But that's a journey that we are trying to chart out for ourselves. So the question then being that if we want to rebuild Antara as a multiplayer, unbelievably high-quality world, then we are still looking at, let's say, as a AAA game, it's maybe 2 years. But I'm pretty sure with our experience that we can go and release a limited scope game maybe in the next 2 months. So I think that's a great thing to think about. And also to think that UEFN can also push you into a much more dynamic roadmap of game development, which for me as an indie developer, the biggest reason I'm broke half the time with this damn game is because of the lack of dynamism and the lack of movement that you kind of, hardcode and hardwire these ideas about what your game is, and then you stuck with it, and then the investor pays you money, then you stuck with it for 2 more years, and hey, time is short, and we got to act fast. Okay, so some of the early dev real quick, earlier we were saying, okay, what can we do? What are the limitations? Obviously, it turned out very soon that the kind of ideas we had might not be possible right now. So we came up with one level simpler, saying, okay, there are 2 teams, blue team, red team. There are color changing platforms. There are basic mechanics around rotation, position, and jump. And there's a basic experience flow. Players start and spawn in a location. They're inside a closed arena. There are gates to the next section. They're locked. There's a physical bridge. But only when you complete all this can you go to the next step. We explored things like groove points, so the red team has to go on the red paths, and so on. The color paths keep changing, tiles keep dropping, so on and so forth. So the groove points add to the larger score, but actually it's also, in a sense, a capture the flag kind of a game, and a kind of cooperative, competitive game. Looking at different advanced mechanics where, for us, the question then was, how do we bring classical dance and music back into this kind of a system? So some of the ideas we had were interesting, which was around coordinated maneuvers on the top left as a blocking or an aggressive mechanic. Looking at these kind of trail interceptions like the old school Tron. Some of you have played back in the day in the 90s. And also using the Fortnite creative tools in a sense to give our game the creative energy that we need, and trying to think through what can you build on Fortnite with our assets, and then also thinking through what is the modular nature of our building mechanisms if we were to port into the Fortnite creative kind of system. We also started looking at some marketing ideas. Arvind rightly mentioned the importance of marketing and promotion, and we started saying, okay, how does the world want to look at a project like this? And so bring in some of that Bollywood kind of idea without pushing it too much, and bring in this kind of heritage and fun and so on and so forth. We also started doing some early level design, and this was some of the ideas that seemed like a great centerpiece for this island that we were thinking of. And then from there, what we did was, some of the early work was just literally going into Fortnite and just grabbing all the tools, all the prefabs, and then you can see some of the black pillars, those are ours, and saying that, okay, if Fortnite's not going to let us tamper with their props, can we just cover all the Fortnite objects with our props? And that gives us a good starting point, and it also gives us some basic structure so that we can kit bash in a way. For example, the white and the wine with our black pillar can potentially work. The fountain's there, so it works, we're not touching it. And most importantly, it's free bandwidth. right? In that 800 MB limit that the project has to like hold in some sense, it's precious. So anything you can reuse from inside the prefabs of Fortnite don't cost anything. So the idea being that can we make the game look like a huge space, use few of our assets, but still make it look Indian and stick to like a 500 MB kind of a limit so that we have a little bit headroom to do music, VFX, add other things later, add some lore, cinematics, all that stuff. So this was an initial thing which was quite exciting and fun to do. We also realized early in the day that unfortunately the current Fortnite prefab worlds have nothing to do with India, not even one thing, not even one prop, which I thought was extremely disappointing. But, and there was also very little Asian or African things, maybe 5% possibly. So that was kind of disappointing. I was kind of hoping I would kit bash a bit faster. But regardless, I think that made a great challenge, and I think that is a huge white space. I know that the Unreal team and the Fab team and the Fortnite team are working on exactly what I'm saying, so it's no point complaining. I'm sure it'll get done. But basically looking at this kind of world and again combining from assets, and then we started building small tech, lo-fi prototypes of this kind of island that we wanted to make, which is like a central island. There are these moving discs all around. There are multiple levels. We also decided to let go of the gun because we've never been fond of violence in some sense. Even though Fortnite isn't really violent in the same way as other games, we wanted to let go of the gun. And we said, okay, what's there right now that, because we can't replace the weapon right away, the boomerangs felt like the best tool to play with, and we're very glad with that decision. And so this, what you see, like just in terms of very simple verse code, the discs that are rotating in green was kind of a new small code bit that we developed. And again, that sounds like super simple, but at the end of the day, even simple things in a new language can sometimes be tricky and complicated. And then from there where we went, we tried a lot of things, and then all the stuff I mentioned before, after having chats with the Unreal team, going through the documentation, we felt like, hey, even what we thought was simple is actually very tricky and fiddly, and we may not be able to put out a stable, cool-looking game just with that. So we basically then run based on Arvind's suggestion. In fact, we said, okay, let's not think so complicated. Let's start really simple. Let's start with what's there. So if some of you have seen it, there's a really great parkour elimination race example in the Unreal documentation for UEFN. It's a great one to follow. There are other games there as well, which I would highly recommend. I was in the beginning saying, oh, why should I follow? You know, my whole team was saying, these are the simple games. There's nothing happening. Do we really need to follow this? Why are they saying this? And then we understood a little better when we tried it that, hey, it actually makes a lot of sense to build your first game, even if you're a big, older studio, to build your first game on UEFN is a thrill. And it can be based on very simple principles. I think that's a huge learning, which I don't want to underestimate. So that basically gave this very simple schema, which was about, pre-game area, race area, and an arena. You start in the pre-game area, you have an elimination race. The winner of the race gets a choice of gun, which we don't have, and you go into the arena. The first one is a parkour race, and the arena is an elimination race with the last person standing. So with that in mind, we started exploring some of the prefabs in UEFN, which give you, there are these parkour prefabs, if you've seen, which give you a whole bunch of these kind of like separate, like amusement park style, which you can see in the background there as well. And they're all kitted out with these little devices for shock, for ice cubes in your feet, or sliding, etc., etc. Some really fun ones actually. And I think and here you can see what I've been trying to do then, which is like cover it with our stuff, make it look Indian, cover it with other materials that work in our palette, and see what happens. And I think the look is like really funny and cool. And then we started also exploring our own assets inside UEFN. This is an automaton. It's going to be animated. It's not. Which is kind of like holding this kind of central piece. And then the idea was that that's at a height, and then you get to move around all these discs, and you can eliminate the other players through that. Just a quick note on assets. I know Arvind showed a few. These are kind of some of the assets from our project. Here, and these were originally made for a AAA environment, so like 4K textures, higher poly count, all of that stuff. And we were quite puzzled by what we should do to try out stuff. And we definitely didn't have the budgets or the bandwidth in some sense to redo everything for UEFN. So these are optimized assets for UEFN. I'll show you what they look like. We followed a very small hack, basically, and almost an automated hack, to just bring down the texture size. So these are all running on 256K textures, lower poly count with the kind of semi-automated decimation, and then bring it back to UEFN. It worked amazingly well. All the models are less than 4 MB almost. The bigger one is a little more. And the quality is not, I mean, obviously, it's not AAA quality, but I'll show you what it looks like. But again, it was amazing for me because I had this very poor impression of what's going to happen. So did my team. But to see these as the models we're going to use, yeah, of course, texture size and, you can get better, but it's not bad at all. We were super thrilled with it, that we could get such detailed objects and not even lose that feel of what it means to be in a AAA environment was like super amazing. And then this is just a little asset video. I'm not going to play the whole thing in the interest of time. I know I must be having less than a minute left now. Yes. Maybe, I'm looking there. Okay, cool. So this is just a quick asset walk. I just put them all out. I'll just go through it a little bit faster. But basically, what was very useful for me was the Fortnite scaling system. Like the Fortnite scale, obviously scale is important in any game. Fortnite scale is sort of interesting in a certain way that if you, everything seems bigger, smaller in level design, but much bigger in the game. So anyway, that car is there for scale, not from our own asset thing. But these are all the assets I was showing you, but we basically started scaling them in a certain way, and through that we also, sorry, I'm just going a little fast, but I'll just stop at a few. I started also making ideas for platformers, like, okay, can we scale up these boxes? How big is it for one person? Different sizes of pillars, different places you can walk through, and then importantly, just one thing, which was, this is the Ratha that I showed you earlier. And I just wanted to show you the instruments. This is the cyberpunk instrument I was showing you. Yes, I just want to show you this part, yeah. So we were thinking, what's an interesting platformer game which is not just platform? Let's scale up the musical instruments. When people jump on these instruments, they play those sounds. Maybe when all the players are running around the environment, it becomes some kind of a crazy sounding Indian instrument. And it's fun, and it's our world. And so we basically started scaling on the side to understand the scaling so that we can bring these modules back in. So I'm going to unfortunately, you can check out Instagram on Antariksha.studio if you want to see more of this. Of course, the modeling, I just want to compliment the modeling team. It's a brilliant bunch that's worked on this. For me, it's the highlight of the project to have people that skilled working for us and with us. Then we also went back to the main world, started building the world around that central structure. Hit a few asset kind of problems, those red cubes, like sometimes when you're importing assets from Fab or something you made, sometimes there are like some issues at times, and I would mention that porting professionally to Fab for UEFN is not something we've done, but that is obviously the way to do it. And so yeah, just added more stuff. This is a huge room. It looked great, like it looks like a real video game kind of a feeling, but then when you actually run around, you feel like, damn, no player is going to run through so much. It just looks great, and you're always having to look up. And then we came to a better prototype, so I'm almost on my final slides. This is basically a run-through. I'm not going to run through it, the whole thing, but basically we started, so this is the racing room. It's not been skinned, basically, right now. But we added collectibles. We added our own heritage things on top of the Fortnite coin. One of the things that you should know is that Fab devices at this point cannot be tampered with. So you can't change the mesh. You can't change the properties. You often also can't change the surface that they're built on at times. So for example, a jumping board relates to the board below it and so on. All these things we just discovered like 2 days back, which is why our demo is not in the booth, because we tried to do too much and messed up some stuff. But this is basically a simple race. So I'll just skip the race. You go right till the end. There's that teleportation device that even Arvind showed. Get into the teleportation device. I'll just start from there. And you enter into that arena. You get spawned. 5, in this case, because of the world design, 5 of you can get spawned. All of you get spawned in a small cubicle like this on different sides of the circle. And then you basically enter the arena. It's not multiplayer right now because we couldn't get our Fortnite island code because of some other complications. But basically, yeah, I mean, you can use your boomerang, you can go around. There are these jumping pads, which this is the one which is not working, but essentially you can jump on and fly around the place and, hide from people and so on and so forth and eliminate them. And then there are a few parts here for like just walking around the small corners where you can, go around and see some things, see the gate of this like island, hopefully meet a few people, talk to them, etc. sitting around the corners. Yeah, and I just want to show you one last view from here, which is basically just a view from the top, which looks quite nice. There we go. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so this was the idea that all the instruments are around this. So what we're trying to make essentially is that there's a giant machine which takes music from all these instruments and using all these special frequencies. Once you win, this central piece gets activated and it turns out to be a spaceship and it takes you up into the sky. That's basically how it works. And the idea with the different islands we make is is this concept, but different music and dance machines on different islands or on the same islands when you come back. Finally, a few quick thoughts. I do feel that UEFN represents a new paradigm, and this requires new thinking in every way around monetization, your attitude, your agility, the diversity that you're willing to put out as a game studio, also the competition that you're competing with. You might be competing with 16-year-old kids making 10 times as much money as you on UEFN, just like YouTube, or even 12-year-olds. I wouldn't put it past them. So, as of mid-40s game designer, I feel like it's super exciting. I want to compete with people like that in a fun way, and I do feel like I need a new paradigm. I think the industry needs a new paradigm, and I think UEFN could provide that. It makes you question also in the same breath, similar question is, are you a game designer or a content creator? And I think this is very important because as media has become transmedia, individual disciplinary designers and creators have all become content creators. And I think that's an important aspect which I think requires more unpacking beyond the scope of this talk, but I think it's important. The other big thing around Indian versus global, I think UEFN represents an entirely new dimension in globalization of Indian video games. It offers something we've never had before as Indian game developers, which is access to the international market without investors coming in the way and without publishers coming in the way. I think that's unbelievable. For me, that's like super exciting. And also this whole idea, are you inside or outside, right? In the sense that, you know, are you inside India making a game for the world, or are you outside India consuming an Indian game because you're interested in the world? And I think this disrupts that whole thing for me personally, and it's super important. Unparalleled reach and a completely new stage for Indian culture, which I think has not been explored, and it offers that opportunity. It's really important to understand that you're walking on a road that hasn't been built, though you have the roadmap. And I think it's really important that this requires, obviously there are pros and cons of verse. I think yes, that's a session Karan is doing later, so I won't get into it. But we face the same problems as any developer in the world, and we're trying our best. And you got to keep your eye on the roadmap. And finally, I think the most important thing, I think from what I understood, speaking briefly to the UEFN team and seeing some of the talks on YouTube and all that from Unreal Fest, it's about making it fun, and it's trying to force everybody to return to that principle. I don't think that's easy for most people because the industry is not that in reality. And I think something like this will hopefully force, I hope it forces many people back into what is the most obvious thing about video games, that you make it for fun, you don't make it for money, you make it so other people have fun, and if that makes money, that's amazing. And that's very difficult in this world of investors and stakeholders and presentations and pitches and all that. But this is the reality, and I think UEFN helps you think about that. And will we move our project to UEFN after the last week of doing this, trying to get it to the stage? I definitely think yes, and I do think yes for both my projects. Thank you.